We back at it again, friends. It's your boy Herschel Robinson, aka Hershey R47. If you've been with me in the first two episodes, you know Hershey R47 is my Instagram handle. It's spelled just like the candy, then the letter R, the number 47. Man, check me out on Instagram. Follow me on there. I promise you won't miss anything I do. Well, guys, as you know, man, this is another episode of Sports We Watchin Livin Talkin. And today, man, I want to get into a few things, man. I want to get into the Packers game, the Packers and the Bucks. I kind of want to talk about some of this NFL trading landscape with these quarterbacks, man. A little bit of Hall of Fame, Major League Baseball Hall of Fame stuff, and a little bit of basketball, man. So, man, let's get into it, man. I want to talk about the Packers and the Buccaneers. So, watch that game. Live, and then I went back and watched quite a bit of it after that, man, and there's a few things that I noticed. So, one of the first thing I noticed, man, like the Buccaneers, pretty much that whole game ran either cover one man, which is free safety or safety deep, and everybody's manned up on the receivers and the tight end and running back. Or they ran a cover two man and they had two safeties deep, but man across the board. That's pretty much what they ran. There's one time I saw where on the backside they ran man and they ran zone on the front side. But for the most part, they ran man. They challenged those receivers at the line of scrimmage. They were real handsy for that whole game. The interception that Aaron Rodgers threw to, I think it's Sean Murphy Bunting. They showed in the replay, man. He grabbed the guy's jersey and it slowed him down just enough, and Rodgers threw it. And I kind of suspect Rodgers probably thought they were going to get like a holding call for that, or a pass interference call. But they didn't call it. He got the interception. That was key. But I really want to talk about that man coverage. When you have the Packers were considered number one offense in the NFL because of their red zone efficiency, right? They had the best efficiency. I don't have the percentages right in front of me about how proficient they were in the red zone, but they were the most proficient offense. And Aaron Rodgers led the league in touchdown passes. I think he had 48, or I think it was 48 touchdown passes in the regular season. And so, what I noticed, they challenged those receivers all day long, and the receivers had trouble separating. So what would happen is if they ran cover two, they would cheat the safety over to Devontae Adams, and then they just man everybody else. And with the exception of that deep pass to Marquez Valdez-Scantling and a few underneath passes to him and Lazard, for the most part, man, those guys struggled to really create significant separation throughout the game. And so, most of the game they really didn't need to send a blitzer, a lot of blitz. And when they did, it probably was just one additional guy. So there was a 5-man rush, the four down lineman, and then a linebacker was sent. Sometimes they sent a safety blitz, right? And so what would happen is because they weren't creating a separation, Rodgers had to try to buy time sometimes to get out the pocket to see if he can buy time for his receivers to kind of get open. But then you notice, the other thing too is what caused a problem because of the lack of separation. It was because it caused him to get sacked. I think he was sacked 5 times total, but in the first half he was sacked 3 times. And they had double digit. They were in the double digits in terms of pressures, so they was getting significant pressure on them all day long. I know a lot of people, you got people saying, "Oh well, they lost because of Rodgers. He played a bad game, or he came up short, or he didn't do a good job." So I do want to address the red zone attempt they had where they went to Devontae Adams 3 times in a row. So that first pass, where they had Devontae lined up. I think he was lined up in the slot, and then he kind of ran I want to say he ran a flat route. I might be wrong about that, but I think he ran a flat route, and Rodgers tried to throw it to him before he had turned around, and he threw it with so much velocity because the blitz that they sent, I think it was a safety blitz. He really didn't have much time to wait for Devontae to really stick his right foot in the ground and kind of start to turn his shoulders. So he had to throw it quickly, and it really didn't give Devontae Adams enough time to really set. So if it was just a hair late, maybe like a half of a second, thrown a half a second later, or with just a little bit less of velocity, I think Devontae would have came down with it. So, however, it did hit him in the hands. And so, like they say, man, as a receiver, if it hits you in the hands, you're supposed to catch it. So that one's kind of, that was just a tough one. The next one, they tried to, I think it was like a sprint out, and he tried to get it real quick to Devontae in the flats. And Devontae David, the linebacker for the Buccaneers, he just made a great play, man. He broke on the ball. He read a sprint out. And so anytime like that, quick game, you're supposed to try to get underneath the closest route, and that's what he did, and he batted away. So that one, that was just a good play. The next play, however, I'm going to blame on Rodgers, right? So I think, Adams I think he was in the slot, and Rodgers he predetermined he was going to throw it to him no matter what. So he threw it to him in the back of the end zone. By the time he threw it to him, Devontae, he really didn't have enough time to set and get both his feet down. But if you go back and look at that play, Allen Lazard was wide open underneath, man. So if he had just came off of his first read and Adams, he could have had Lazard for a touchdown as opposed to a field goal. So I will blame that particular play on Aaron Rodgers. That's on him. Then you had a situation where Kevin King, the first touchdown the Buccaneers scored, I noticed that. So he did a decent job on Evans at the line of scrimmage and jamming him. And he was kind of with him until at the very end, he tried to cut underneath, and he thought he misjudged the ball. He thought he could bat the ball down as opposed to playing the receiver all the way through and trying to challenge at the last minute. I think he would have been a lot better off. The other thing too is that was a big play in the game was the second half. Aaron Jones, he fumbled the ball, and Devin White returned it. I know he returned it to the red zone. I forget what exactly where, but it was somewhere around the 20-yard line, inside the 20-yard line. And the Buccaneers they capitalized. They didn't really have very far to go. So you had that going on. The other thing I didn't really like was the amount of times they were trying to use or get Jamal Williams going as opposed to Aaron Jones, who is their most explosive running back. That was the other thing I didn't like about their game plan. They started off trying to feed Jamal Williams. So I didn't like that as well. But all in all, I felt like Aaron Rodgers played a pretty good game. He played well enough to win. And the defense made some good plays. There's some mistakes they made, no doubt. One of the biggest mistakes that everybody was talking about or has been talking about was the last play in the first half. So Mike Pettin decides to run a cover one robber. So basically what a cover one robber is, you have one deep safety. You take one of the safeties to kind of help cover the middle of the field. So typically you're probably trying to, you're trying to keep them from throwing it in the middle of the field in that type of defense. You're guarding the seams, typically where your slot receivers or your tight ends are. Well, in that situation with 6 seconds left in the first half, if anything, you would think you'd want them to throw over the middle of the field so that they would run out of time. I don't know. I don't think that they had any more timeouts. So I don't really like that particular defensive play call, but let's just deal with that play call as is. So everybody knows Kevin King got beat. He was playing Beal technique. So Beal technique, the objective is to to drop at somewhat of an angle. You kind of turn, your butt is kind of pointed towards the sideline. You're protecting the outside. You don't have any outside help in a cover one. So, but you're supposed to be able to see through the receiver to the quarterback. That's the purpose of that kind of technique. Well, pre-snap, he lined up 5 yards back. Well, I would say he should have did what J.R. Alexander did on the other side, was back up to 8, maybe even 10 yards, because Scotty Miller was lined up on Kevin King, which is a horrible matchup for Kevin King. And instead of just immediately bailing out and getting on his horse as soon as it snapped, like, he kind of lollygagged his way out of there, almost as if he thought he had, almost as like it was like he had cover 2 over there where the safety was closer, so the safety could immediately come over there and help him. So then Scotty Miller gets outside of him, and at that point he's even. And now Kevin King is what? He's flailing his arms. His technique is bad. It's too late, man. You're already taking false steps. You already beat when he's even. So there's a few things where I notice when I look at Kevin King's game. For me, I don't think he's fit for this defense. Mike Pettin comes from the school of defense of Rex Ryan. These guys are cover 1, cover 0 guys. They're really aggressive defensive minds. And you got to have cornerbacks that have really fluid hips. They got really quick and fluid hip turn. Their steps have to be precise. They can't be having those false steps. And their base has got to be good. All these things are things that Kevin King doesn't do well. What I notice, as soon as somebody gives him like a pat, a 1-2 or a 1-2-3 with their feet, a left, right, left, or a left, right, the first thing he does is open up his base. So now you've already taken false steps. And the other thing too is you've made it harder for yourself to change direction. So you already beat. So in my opinion, that's a personnel issue. This guy isn't fit to run that defense. Where I see Kevin King fitting is one of those long corners that the 49ers got, like in the mode of a Richard Sherman. Not saying he's on Richard Sherman's level, but that's his style of play. He's a zone corner. And when I say zone corner, the 49ers, the Seahawks, I would imagine the Jets are going to probably run that style of defense. I think the Cowboys hired, it's either, I don't know if it was the previous head coach of the Falcons or Gus Bradley, who's used to be a defensive coordinator for the Seahawks years ago. But they run a lot of cover 3 zone, right? And so in zone, it's basically like a puzzle. You got an area that you've got to cover. And so for someone like Kevin King, in that style of defense where they run, you can immediately turn, run a bail, but then you have the ability to see through the receiver to the quarterback, and all you got to do is break, right? Now, eventually, all zone would turn into man, but it's only man to the nearest guy, the guy that's within your zone or your proximity. You don't travel with somebody all the way across the field, if they run like a crossing route or something like that. So that's why I see him fitting better in a defensive scheme like that. But honestly, he's not very fluid. He doesn't have good precise feet. He takes so many false steps. He widens his base too much, and he's really not that fast. When I watch him, honestly, I don't think he's faster than like a high 4.5, 4.6. So he don't even have makeup speed. So that's the thing that Tampa Bay noticed, right? Like, the other thing too is he played right corner the whole game, and that leads me to believe that he probably doesn't have the ability to go to the left side. So what does Tampa Bay do? They move receivers around, guys that he can't guard. His best matchup, even though I don't think he can really shut down or do a great job with Mike Evans, but his best matchup is against Mike Evans. Why? Because Mike Evans isn't going to route you up. Mike Evans isn't going to out-quick you. He's not going to shake you. Mike Evans is going to box you out. He's going to jump ball you, out-jump you. Those things I feel like Kevin King is a better matchup for. So if they had been moving him around, you could have kept him on Mike Evans all game long. That's another problem I think that they ran into. And so for me, going back to that play before halftime, I believe that they should have ran, even if you don't want to run a prevent defense, they could have at least run a cover 4 where you drop both of your corners and both your safeties in coverage. Make sure they don't beat you deep. Make them check it down, man. Cover all that stuff. And that ended up, when you look at the point totals, that ended up being huge when it came to the outcome of the game. So I would say there's a little bit of a personnel issue that the Packers have. They need a receiver that's going to threaten the defense deep, cause them guys to commit and zone faster so those zones open up quicker, those holes get bigger, and then 2, that may cause the teams to run more cover 2, and the safeties have to commit to help on the number 1 receiver in Adams, and then whatever that other receiver is. A good guy, I think that they might want to target, because he's a free agent, somebody like Will Fuller. I think Will Fuller would probably be a good addition to this offense. Add a little bit more speed and dynamic, to the offense. So that's what I would say. Some of the issues they have, I think, is a combination of coaching, understanding situational football. I think you got a little bit of a personnel issue, which are things that, quite honestly, a lot of people were talking about going into this season. The Packers drafting Jordan Love in the first round rather than trying to draft maybe a receiver. As deep as this receiver class was, they could have got a receiver. Could you imagine if they had Jordan Jefferson or even somebody like Chase Claypool, right? Receivers like that to go along with Devontae Adams, and then having Alan Lazard. I'm not going to mention Marquez Valdes-Scantling because he's too inconsistent, man. He's got speed, but he had a pretty good game Sunday, but he's been up and down all year long. So that's what I would say with the issues with the Green Bay Packers. There was other things in that game. They still had opportunities to win, but I'm not going to really spend any more time on that because there's so many things to get into with football, man. And the crazy part about it is even though Aaron Rodgers is probably going to win the MVP, there's talk that he may end up becoming a free agent, or he might not be with Green Bay, or people within management may not be on the same accord with bringing him back. It seems like the coaches want him, right? The players want him, the coaches want him, but everybody in that building in the front office may not want to bring him back. So it's going to be interesting to see. There's a lot of guys. Adam Schefter mentioned that this is going to be the biggest overhaul or quarterback movement we've ever seen in the NFL. And so there's a couple of guys I want to talk about in terms of free agency, right? So the question I pose to you guys is, what would you give up to get Deshaun Watson and Matthew Stafford? What would you give up to get those guys? So we've heard a lot of people throw around 3 first-round picks for Deshaun Watson. That's the starting point. I've heard some people say for Matthew Stafford, maybe 1 first-round pick, right? The thing about it is with Matthew Stafford, the Lions seem to be trying to do him a solid and send him to a team where he can compete for a championship. So I saw a list out there of his preferences. I assume this is a list that he's made it clear that the number 1 team he had on this list was the 49ers. The second was the Colts. The third was the Jets. 4th was the Bears. And 5th was the Panthers. So in my opinion, I wouldn't want to go to the 49ers because it seems like they get banged up every year. There's always an overhaul of injuries of key players, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But this year, defense got injured quite a bit. So that's one of my biggest concerns with them. I ultimately think he's going to probably end up with the Colts because if he was able to go to the Colts, then they can go on ahead and try to make a play at Kenny Golladay or Allen Robinson. I would say Kenny Golladay because he has a rapport with him. Get them a number 1 receiver. I think that T.Y. Hilton his best days are behind him. You got to get a number 1 receiver. I know they probably like Michael Pittman Jr., but I don't know if he's a true number 1 receiver. We'll see how he progresses in his career. You got a decent collection of tight ends, a really good offensive line, and your young running back, Jonathan Taylor, is establishing himself as one of the best young running backs moving forward. So I think even though they're in the AFC and they'd have to compete against the Chiefs and the Bills and some of these other teams and we have to see where Deshaun goes, I think that's his best option. But I would say, for Matthew Stafford, maybe like a first round pick and maybe like a, third round pick, something like that for Matthew Stafford. They probably, the asking price probably won't be so too high, especially considering what the free agent market looks to be shaping up to be. As far as Deshaun Watson, I do believe like you probably have to step to the plate to start off with 3 first rounders. So a lot of people talking about the Jets, and then you got people talking about Miami. Now, as a Saints fan, I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and they're like, "Man, what would you give up to get Deshaun? Do you trade Alvin Kamara?" I said, "Man, if I got to trade Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas, and a draft pick, I'd do it because guess what? I can pick up Allen Robinson or Kenny Galladay in free agency if I lose Michael Thomas and I feel confident in being able to replace Kamara. Will I be able to get a player at running back that's as special as Kamara? Maybe not, right? But it's easier to replace a dynamic running back than it is to get a generational talent at quarterback. So, that's what I would do if I was the Saints. I don't think that's even a legitimate place that we can even consider because I don't think the Saints have the assets that the Texans are looking for. But let's just deal with some of the teams. Obviously, like I said, the Jets have some ammo, right? They can offer, I think, two first rounders, Sam Darnold, maybe a future first rounder, maybe another player. Miami can offer, I think 3 first rounders this year and then a high second round pick. So I wouldn't be surprised if Miami becomes one of the big plays here, but don't count out a team like Atlanta. It seems to be that Atlanta might be ready to move off of Matt Ryan. So what if they offer their 4th overall pick and Matt Ryan, maybe they offer a future first round pick, So I wouldn't count them out the game. Right now, those 3 teams probably look the most likely, but for Deshaun Watson, the answer is whatever you got to do to get him. Now obviously the caveat to this is he's got a no trade clause, so the possibility that he may not want to go to the place that's going to offer the most assets to you. So that's something to keep in mind. But I do want to mention something here, guys. It's funny how since the last episode I talked to you about the reasons why Deshaun Watson was wanted out of Houston, why there ain't no turning back. He's out of here. And I did hint that there's some racial issues here. It's a human issue, right? And I gave you a lot of points as to why I'm discerning from afar that is the reason why. I've heard so many guys talk about, oh, well, if you're the coach and the GM, you need to have a talk with him and stuff like that. And I've heard people say, man, you get rid of everybody short of the owner. What do you do when the owner is the issue? And no one's going to fire the owner. In my opinion, the only way you can keep Deshaun Watson is if the owner sells that team before they got to trade him. Straight up. I think the only way that you could possibly have a chance to keep Deshaun Watson is if if Cal McNair sells the team to someone else, then possibly you may have a chance to salvage things. Anything short of that, I really don't believe that you can salvage that relationship and try to keep him in the building. So that's my take on that. I don't want to spend too much more time on that, but the one thing I do kind of want to leave with a ranking of some of the quarterbacks that I feel that are at least rumored to be free agents, right? So we know Deshaun is not a free agent. He's got to be traded. But in terms of quarterbacks that can be on the move, I would say he'd be number 1. Let's say the Packers are going to trade Aaron Rodgers, right? I would say Aaron Rodgers would be the second most attractive. Matthew Stafford is going to be traded. Then I would put Matthew Stafford after that. And then I would say, assuming Dak Prescott doesn't sign with the Cowboys, and let's say he does and they sign him and trade him, I would put Dak after that. And then, it's kind of a toss-up. It looks like the Rams might want to part ways with Jared Goff. When you look at some of the comments that Les Snead's making, they asked him about Jared Goff being the quarterback. He looked at the calendar and said, well, what is today's date? January, whatever. Oh, well, he's our quarterback right now. That doesn't exactly sound like an endorsement of your franchise quarterback. So at this point, man, I think the Rams has determined that he's not their guy. But the problem with the Rams is because they were moving to Los Angeles, they spent so much money paying all of these high-profile players, and now they are strapped against the cap. They traded away draft picks. They don't have a first round. I don't even think they have a second rounder, and so it's going to be hard for them to make a move on another quarterback. So they're in a tough spot, man. So but it looks like they're ready to move on from him. San Francisco might be ready to move on for Garoppolo, and if they do, I wouldn't be surprised if Garoppolo ends up in New England. That's who Belichick wanted to be his quarterback, after Tom Brady anyway. He actually wanted to trade Tom Brady and start Garoppolo and for him to be the quarterback moving forward a few years before Brady left New England. So that's going to be interesting to see. I think this is a topic we're going to hear all off season while we got the Senior Bowl going on this weekend. You got the Combine's going to come up pretty soon. Then you got the draft's going to be in April. And I think we're going to hear about free agency and these quarterbacks pretty much every day moving forward, man. So, I kind of want to, switch it up a little bit, man, because, hey, man, this is sports talk, a sports podcast, right? So I kind of want to mix it up a little bit. I haven't addressed anything outside of football and basketball, but I want to switch it up a little bit. So you see I got my Dodgers cap on. I'm a Dodgers fan. And being that I got this cap on, man, I want to talk about the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, man. The Major League Baseball Hall of Fame is a joke, bro. Like, it is an absolute joke. So this is the first time since 2013 that no one was voted into the Hall of Fame. They had all of these candidates, right? You had Kirk Schilling, you had Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, Scott Rowland, Omar Vizquel, Billy Wagner, Ty Hilton, Gary Sheffield, Manny Ramirez. You had Sammy Sosa, Andy Pell. The list goes on of guys, just to name a few. And nobody was voted in. I think Kirk Schilling had the highest percentage of votes. I think it was 71%. And he came out and said, man, look, man, y'all can go ahead and take me off the ballot, yo. I'd rather for my peers to vote for me because I respect that more. And I think a lot of people are getting a sour taste in their mouths from the Hall of Fame because it's so hypocritical, right? So few reasons why I think they're really hypocritical. For one, so they have this moral clause, and they don't want to vote in players that played during the steroid era or were proven to have taken performance-enhancing drugs during the era. I'd like to remind you guys that during that time, there was no rule against steroids or performance-enhancing drugs. Now, I'm not a proponent for performance-enhancing drugs. Never took them. I don't believe in taking them. However, you have to deal with what reality was at that point in time. I didn't see Major League Baseball having an issue with Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa when they had their home run tour. You had the commercials, the chicks dig the long ball. They benefited so much from that from a financial standpoint. The viewership was up. People were into it. Then Barry Bonds came along. Barry Bonds broke Hank Aaron's record. But Barry Bonds was a Hall of Famer before steroids. You can say the same thing with Kirk Schilling or especially Roger Clemens. I think one of the biggest reasons these guys took steroids was for the longevity or to prolong their prime. With Roger Clemens' case, I think he started to wear down. And so that was the only way for him to get to the point where he can kind of get where he can still deliver at a high level. Now, like I said, I am not a proponent for steroids or performance-enhancing drugs, but again, I got to deal in reality. Even with all that, you still got to perform. You still got to have the muscle memory. You still have to have hand-eye coordination. Like with Barry Bonds, like I said, he was a Hall of Famer before that. If you go look at his numbers, the guy had a tremendous rate of drawing walks, but yet he still had so many home runs. He didn't strike out much. He had one of the best eyes that we've ever seen. That's hand-eye coordination. That's recognition of the spin of the baseball out of the pitcher's hand, right? That's recognition. That's also film study. You still have to prepare for every pitcher on that roster. You got to prepare for the starter. You got to prepare for all of the relievers and the closer. That's preparation. Pitcher's case, it doesn't impact your accuracy, right? You still have to have the muscle memory. You still have to be able to throw the ball through the zone. You still got to be able to throw it in the zone and break it outside the zone. You got to be able to hit your corners, your spots. Those things, there's still value to someone outside of looking at them as just steroids. I had my strength and conditioning coach in college. I think Coach Orr said this. It was after one of my teammates he just got suspended for testing positive for steroids. And he said, man, you can take steroids. Like if you're not a good athlete, if you don't make plays, beforehand, if you're not really good, it's not going to really make you a good player if you take steroids. Yeah, you might be faster or stronger, but you're still going to be trash. You're just going to be fast and trash or strong and trash. You're still not going to make plays. And so that's the one thing I would say about Major League Baseball and the Hall of Fame. The other thing I want to bring up is, you got former pitchers that are in the Hall of Fame now, like Gaylord Perry, who's admitted to throwing spitballs, which is illegal. Or you got the first commissioner in Landis, and the thing about him, man, is that he was a key intricate part in keeping the Kennesaw Landis is his name. I'm sorry. He was a key part in keeping the African Americans out of the major leagues. So. But yet, he's in the Hall of Fame. And yet, you are on your high horse, and you don't want to allow these guys during the steroid era, especially the ones that were Hall of Fames beforehand. Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, we know that they wouldn't have made the Hall of Fame without the steroids and jacking home runs. We get all that. But for guys like a Barry Bonds, man, come on, man. This guy was already one of the greatest baseball players of all time before then. And yet, you're still holding on to a moral clause that you have. The other thing, too, is there's been a lot of talk about these baseballs going back to 2015 as the baseballs being juiced. One of the main guys that's been complaining about these baseballs is Justin Verlander. Justin Verlander's been saying for a few years, man, that these baseballs are juiced. When I say juiced, so in 2000, in the steroid era, that was the highest amount of total home runs that were hit up into the year 2017. So in 2000, the total amount of home runs that was hit was 5,693. In 2016, there was 5,610 dingers. But when people started to notice an increase in the home runs and a change in the ball was right after All-Star break in 2015. Now in 2017, when they broke the record, it was 6,105 home runs that were hit. Now it dropped a little bit in 2018, but then in 2019, they skyrocketed again to 6,776 home runs was hit, man. Like that's absolutely insane. So, like from a perspective of a fan, baseball fan, the way it looks is like they found a way to circumvent in terms of cheating, rather than the players cheating individually. Well, the baseball is a cheat, and so we'll increase the home run rate. So what are you going to do if it's proven that these balls were juiced? Are you going to not allow baseball players who played during that time frame from 2015 to to whenever they stop using that baseball to get into the Hall of Fame? And the reason why I say proven is because ESPN Sports Science had USC, University of Southern California, and Kent State to do a study on the ball. So they cut it in half. They ran a CT scan to try to determine if there was changes in it. So they took 4 balls from 2014 to 2015, 3 balls from 2015 to 2016, and they took 1 ball, I think was from the 2019 season. They cut them in half. They tested them. They like I said, they ran a CT scan. What they found was the newer balls, like 2015, 2016, when the home run started to spike, and including 2019, there was about a 40% difference in density. So they were less dense than the older balls. They were lighter overall. They're a little bit lighter. They're more bouncy, and then they're more air resistance. So all of that stuff adds up to the ball traveling further. I believe that they found that, on average, man, that can lead to about a 3-foot difference in distance. So you have all of that contributing to an increase in home runs. Now, obviously, baseball is different now, right? You don't see as many teams playing small ball, like bunting to get on base or bunting to move the runners over or, hitting in the gaps, right? You don't see as much as that. A lot of times these teams are going all or nothing. They're swinging for the fences. So you see the strikeouts numbers increase. You don't see people, they're not a concern as much hitting for average. They're more concerned with the home runs, which plays into analytics, right? But you can understand why, because the rate, the percentage or your chance of hitting a home run are that much more increased, especially even if you miss it. You slightly miss it off of that sweet spot of the bat, you can still go yard. And so, that's my thing is that's why I say that baseball is hypocritical, man. And, for me, I think it's a joke for the Baseball Hall of Fame not to vote anyone in. The last time they did that was in 2013, and I think it's disrespectful to, heck, even to all of the guys that weren't juicing that you didn't even vote on. So that's kind of my take on the Baseball Hall of Fame, man. And, hopefully there'll be some changes, but, I don't know, man. You got some of these guys that are voting, that they still hold on to this moral clause. But in order to tell the whole story of baseball, you got to tell the good, the bad, and the ugly, because there is ugly history. There is ugly history. There's good history. You got to tell it all to tell the truth. And that's all it is. You go into, the Baseball Hall of Fame, man, it's a museum. And you can't omit the bad parts because that's part of your history, And that's just my take on it, man. And so, I don't want to stay on that any longer. I kind of want to switch sports. I done talked about football and baseball. Now I want to get into the NBA a little bit, man. I've been watching some games. And it's a few topics I want to touch on, man. The first one is about the Denver Nuggets. So we've noticed, man, these guys have had a slow start after getting to the Western Conference Finals in the bubble. And one of the biggest reasons is they lost some people in free agency, but Jamal Murray has been inconsistent. Now, Jamal Murray, when I look at Jamal Murray, I look at him as an overglorified sixth man. I think he's just I truly believe he would be better suited coming off the bench, because I don't think he's a true point guard. And I believe for the Nuggets to really hit their potential, they really need to build around Michael Porter Jr. and Jokic, and for somebody else to run the point, and for Jamal Murray to come off the bench. And right now, I don't know whether or not, Morris is a starting caliber point guard in the league because he hasn't done it yet. But anytime he's come in, he's done pretty well. I wouldn't mind trying that right now. But it looks like they're trying to turn Michael Porter Jr. into just a spot-up three-point shooter. They really don't run any sets for him. And he's so much more than that. To me, this guy reminds me of Dirk Nowitzki. Like, I think you can get it to him in his spots on the post, shoot right over guys. He can shoot the fadeaway. He's got a really nice touch from three-point line. He can dribble and create some space and get to the basket and create his own shot. But for some reason, man, they keep trying to push Jamal Murray. And for me, he's too streaky. This guy's up and down. In the bubble, we seen him have a great series against Utah. You know, he had that 50-point game, but as soon as the next series, he's up and down, man. This, in my opinion, this guy either give you 50 or he gonna give you 10, and that you just can't have that from your number one and number two option. You know, in terms of scoring is concerned. You know, so you know the other thing about him is to free him up. They run so many ball screens to try to create some space for him. But when it comes to the shot clock, when the shot clock is down and your sets don't work, and now you gotta create even and make really tough shots. Like you know, when he's on, man. He can hit 10 in a row. But when he's cold, man, like he shoots you out of the game, and he's really got to work hard. If you put a guy just a little bit taller than him to defend him with equal to more athleticism, like he's gonna struggle. And so, you know, my thing is maybe even if they don't do it next year, by this year, by next year, they really need to start looking at building around Michael Porter Jr., assuming, you know, he can stay healthy and everything. I think this guy has potential to be a superstar player. Going back to high school, I think he was a number one and number two player in the nation, you know, coming into college. He wasn't able to show it in college and because he had a back surgery. He had a back injury and he had back surgery, and that's what hurt his draft stock. So he fell to the teens in terms of the draft. He fell right outside of the draft lottery. So I think he was somewhere around 15 or something like that. And I get it. Jamal Murray was drafted on your team before him. You know, he was already on the Nuggets, but that's a problem they're going to have to address. And I think they're going to be stagnant. They're not going to be able to be one of the better teams in the West until they realize Michael Porter Jr. and Jokic need to be there 1 and 2, and then Murray really needs to be like a 6-man, and you need to have somebody else at that point. And you can even run your offense through Jokic because he's such a great passer. So that's what I would say about the Nuggets. You know, so you know we'll see what happens. You know, but right now it looks like the Nuggets aren't going to, you know, finish as strong as they were. Like I said, they're going to have to fix that. And realize, I don't know if the answer is to get another coach or if it's just a management issue. Is it the coach doesn't believe in Porter Jr. or is it management? You know, we hear comments from Malone constantly. I've heard it this year. I've heard it in the bubble. We got to find minutes. Why do you have to find minutes for this guy? Like like he's one of the best players on your team. Like he's at least top 3 right now. So you shouldn't have to find minutes. Just like you shouldn't have to find ways to get him the ball, like run sets for him. Like that's so, you know, like I said, I don't know if it's a management issue or if it's the coach, but that really needs to get fixed if they're going to reach their potential as a team. Another team, man, for them to reach their potential, I think is for the Sixers to do what they want to do. I think they need to make a trade. So I watched them play the Lakers. You know, I watched the Sixers, you know, in other games too, but in the Lakers game in particular, yes, they won, you know, that game. Tobias Harris made a good shot at the end of the game, but when I look at them, and a lot of it has to do with Ben Simmons being an offensive liability in terms of scoring the ball, they don't have a guy that can create when the shot clock gets low from the three-point line. You can't give it to Embiid out there because he can get stripped, especially in high-leverage games when you get into the playoffs when the defensive pressure increases. They've got to have somebody. You know, Ben can't shoot. He doesn't try to shoot. He can't shoot. You're going to have defenses sag off of him. Tobias Harris is, you know, man, you know, he's more like a number 3 option, man. You know what I'm saying? He's not going to consistently be able to make that play. You really, in my opinion, you need to have a really good guard that can create in that situation. So even if teams try to double Embiid, this guy can still get his because they're sagging off of Ben Simmons. So the guy I'd like to see them go after is Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal's a really good shooter. He can shoot from 3 consistently. He can get his own shot. He can create for himself. He can create for other people. What do you have to do to trade to get him? I'm not sure, man. I mean, I would be willing to throw. I would prefer to keep Tobias Harris, but if I got to throw him in the trade, I do that. If I got to throw in Danny Green, if I got to throw in, you know, maybe a draft pick here and there, maybe like a role player or something like that. Even Shake Milton, I would prefer to keep him, but you know, if I got to throw in some pieces to try to get Bradley Beal, man, I do that, man, because in my opinion, if you add Bradley Beal and you have that guy that can get his when that shot clock is going down, when your sets aren't working, you know, and he can get his shot or create for other people, I believe the Sixers, the way they're playing right now, and if the Sixers, if this the Embiid we're going to see, like the Sixers can win the championship with Bradley Beal on that roster. But I don't believe they can win it without adding a Bradley Beal. So that's why I would say that's a team that I would like to see go after him. I mean, the Bucks could use Bradley Beal. There's a lot of teams that could use him, but I think for the Sixers to take the next step and to really be championship caliber team, I think they need to go after Bradley Beal. I definitely kick the tires on him. Check him out, man. See what the Wizards, see what they're looking at. What do they want for Bradley Beal? I start the conversation like that. What do you want for Bradley Beal? I'm not going to start off saying, hey, this is what I give you. What do you want for Bradley Beal? See what they say, man. See if you can work something out. So that's kind of my take on that, man. And lastly, man, I want to talk about, since I'm talking about the Sixers in the MVP race, and right now I think you really got to consider Joel Embiid. I know his health is always a question, and I wish it wasn't, because the guy's game is, I think this guy, to be honest with you, I think he's the best big man in the league. And it's not all as close as people think. It's just that he hasn't always taken it seriously, and I think this year might be the first year with Doc at the helm that he's taking his diet seriously. I think he respects Doc, which is huge. And so for me, man, I would say for because, I watched the game, man. He was giving it to Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis can't guard Embiid, man. He too soft. He was giving him that work. That's why LeBron pushed him when he went up for that layup, because he was giving them boys that work. They couldn't defend him. You know what I'm saying? And he was making them boys look bad. It is what it is. Like Embiid's got a lot of Olajuwon to his game, except he shoot the three. You know what I'm saying? Then he's got such a soft touch from the free throw line. He makes free throws. The guy is legit, bro. He just got to stay healthy. If he can play, 85 to 90% of the regular season games, I think you legitimately, assuming the Sixers finish, like number one in the East, like they are right now, I think you got to get an MVP to this guy, man. Like that's my opinion. I would say Joel Embiid. Before that game, I would say LeBron was in the lead for it. Obviously, LeBron is still, it's out of Embiid and LeBron, in my opinion, right now for MVP. And if things kind of stay where they at, that's probably where it's going to finish out of those two guys. So we're going to see how it all turns out. But again, man, I really like to see them guys trade for Bradley Beal. You got a championship caliber coach right now that I think is maximizing what these guys do well right now, man. I think it's a time to really make a run. So, guys, that's all I have for you for this episode, man. Again, it's been another episode of Sports We Watchin Livin Talkin. You've been chilling with your boy Herschel Robinson, aka Hershey R47. Please subscribe to my channel, guys. Go ahead and subscribe, hit that like button. Other than that, guys, till next time, we out. Peace.